I relished being in the classroom. My whole existence had been mapped out down to the career conflict I would have. Would I want to be a principal or stay a teacher? Would I move to a high school or remain in special ed? When my friends back home tell me stories about connecting with children, I feel acutely that I'm not making a difference. I find it difficult to believe that my getting more famous helps anyone else. Some days it'd be nice to forget it all happened and go to the mall. When I feel down like that, I try and focus on what is good about my life now. I'm making more money for charity than I ever would have been able to earn as a teacher. I'm calling attention to children with special needs on a broader platform. I'm singing. To me, singing is the single most joyous thing a person can do. A song is like a smile. If you meet someone from another country, even if you don't speak the same language, you know what a smile means. A song is the same. Music produces feelings that need no translation. My mother prophesied years ago that my voice would take me places. She was certain there was a reason I was able to sing. I'm still discovering what that reason is. I am a mama's boy. When I was 3 years old, my mother lifted me from the tub, and I kicked the edge, and I started crying, and she said, "It'll get well before you're married." I wasn't sure what married was, so I asked. And she said that a wife was someone who would cook for me and wash my clothes and love me. And I said to her, "I'm already married." Mom laughed and said, "To whom?" And I said, "You, Mama." I was born Clayton Holmes Grissom on November 30th, 1978, in Rex Hospital in Raleigh. I weighed 6 pounds 11 ounces and already had a thatch of red hair. I also was born with a collapsed lung. After I was delivered, I was immediately put on a respirator and a tube was inserted into my chest to help me breathe. My mother wept. My birth father, Vernon, left the hospital and went to the parking lot to get drunk. This was something that my birth father did often, and having a sick baby was a better excuse than most. When I was a bit older, my mother confessed to me that she had not especially wanted a child. She knew my birth father was an alcoholic, knew also what happened after he drank too much. She did not desire to bring a baby into the chaos and violence of her life. Her pregnancy was rough, and she didn't look forward to my birth. But I came anyway, and she says from the moment she heard me wailing, she fell instantly in love. From the day of my birth on, my mother and I were inseparable. Predictably, the addition of an infant did not improve circumstances at home. Vernon did not rise to the occasion. Before I turned 3 years old, we left him. We moved out with only the clothes on our backs and took refuge at the home of Mom's friend from work, Amaryllis McGee, a woman whom I call Nanny and think of as a second grandmother. At Nanny's, we slept on a mattress in her living room, between the front door and the kitchen. She hung a tarp around the bed so we'd have privacy. Ours was not the ideal situation, but my mother made it work. I was never told how bad our money problems were or how depressed she may have felt. She protected me not only from my birth father, but from as many harsh realities as she could. More often than not, she distracted me with music. My mother drove a yellow Ford Torino. Daycare was expensive, so Mama took me with her as many places as she could, including Sears, where she worked as a decorative consultant in the wall-hanging department. When she couldn't keep me at Sears, she'd drive me to Nanny's house, or an hour outside of Raleigh to Granny Aiken's farm. Mom preferred country music to any other, so by age 4, I'd memorized quite a few hillbilly tunes. I remember the two of us singing together in the car, passing the time while we drove back and forth. Around that time, Mom took Granny and me to the Grand Ole Opry. We were touring the stage, and one of the people working there asked if anybody in the group wanted to come up and sing. Mom says I was on that stage quicker than you could drop a bucket. I sang, "Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys." Everyone laughed and clapped. I don't think it was that I was particularly good, just that I was little and loud. If a kid climbs on stage and sings, you're going to applaud. Clearly, I wasn't afraid of performing, but I was frightened of everything else. I was a skittish child. I didn't like bugs or loud noises. When my mom would go to the bathroom, I'd hide behind the couch. I didn't like to be separated from her, not even for a few minutes. I had this idea that I could be snatched away at any time, and leaving my mom was the last thing I wanted. For years, Mom worked Thursday nights at Sears. Even though the routine was identical every week, even though I knew it was coming, I cried when she had to leave. I never got used to seeing her walk out the door. Maybe because of all the crying and clinging, Mom worried that she wasn't providing me with enough masculine activities. So when I was old enough, she enrolled me in T-ball. It was a disaster. I was, without question, the worst T-ball player Raleigh had ever seen. Even my mother was forced to concede that I was terrible, and she never thought anything I did was short of breathtaking. I loathed T-ball. I stunk at T-ball. But when the season ended, I signed up for the next year. I played because I thought my mom wanted me to, But if I remember right, Mom spared me a second season of humiliation and suggested I take piano lessons instead. My teacher, Sandra Powell, was in her early 40s, and we would play at her house. I hated piano. I was a poor student, so after about 2 months of banging on the keys, Mom said, "Why don't we see if we can get her to teach voice?" Now, Sandra was one loud woman. The only way I could hear myself is if I sang as loud as I could because this woman had some lungs on her. She may not have taught me how to sing, but she did teach me how to project. I liked Sandra, but I hated having to practice, so I refused to. And my mom, never one to waste any money, said, "If you're not going to try, then you're not going to go." And that was the end of voice lessons. I think it lasted about 2 months. Which is why when people ask me how I learned to sing, I always credit my mother. Because those hours driving in the Ford Torino were far more influential than any lessons or church choir. I may have picked up the formalities of music from those places, but the true spirit of singing came from listening to my mom warble Patsy Cline as we drove through the North Carolina countryside. Her voice wasn't trained, but it was beautiful. It made me feel things. It showed me how a song can be more than words and music, how when sung with soul, a song carries you to another world, to a place where no matter how much pain you feel, you're never alone. When I was 6, my mother got remarried to one of her coworkers at Sears, a man named Ray Parker. A year later, she had my brother Brett. Mom wasn't sure about enduring another pregnancy at her age, but Ray was so keen to try, she consented. We all lived together in a modest blue 2-story house in Raleigh with a big garage and a fenced backyard. Ray had been married before and had a son named Jeff and a daughter, Amy, who visited on occasion, usually at Christmas time. Mom would always warn us, "You're going to be disappointed this year." She didn't want us to get our hopes up about the gifts because we didn't have as much spending money as the other kids. I remember asking for a phone for my room. "You're going to be so let down," Mom said. "We're not going to be able to give you everything." And then, like a Christmas miracle, I unwrapped a box, and inside was the phone. Now, it was the cheapest, made in Taiwan, on the damaged box shelf at Walmart phone, but it was a phone. I don't know how she managed to find the money, but she did. Another season, I begged for a VCR. She said if I really wanted one, I'd have to buy it myself. So I did. I saved the money I was making mowing yards and bagging groceries and bought myself a VCR. I could not have enjoyed that VCR more. I used to wash the thing. I learned, which is what I'm sure my mother intended, that when you buy your own things, you take care of them a lot better. When something is earned, it pays off dividends far greater than when something comes easy. When I was growing up, Mom took care that everything on the surface looked okay. She hid how poor we really were. I never wore Nikes or Reeboks. I think most of my shoes didn't even have a name on them. Canvas and rubber, that's what they were. But my feet never got wet just the same. We did purchase things, like an answering machine. But it was always 5 years after it came out. I think our answering machine was gas-powered. We were always waiting for the prices to go down. Mom thought that craving designer shoes, video games, CD players, obscured what really counted. Owning things doesn't teach you about life, she'd say. Food, shelter, that's what priorities should be. This is not an easy lesson for a kid, especially once I reached high school. I remember Mom used to proudly walk in and out of the discount shoe store, and I used to be so embarrassed I wouldn't carry the bag. And she'd say, "Fine, I'll carry it. Poverty is no reason for shame." When we shopped at the thrift store, I'd whine, "Why aren't we at Abercrombie & Fitch?" And my mom would shake her head and say, "What you wear doesn't matter, who you are does." My mother has always had the utmost hopes for my younger brother Brett and me. She was very strict about how her children presented themselves to the world. She wanted to be certain that we were upstanding citizens, honest and honorable, and that we were never intentionally unkind. To handle yourself, use your head, she'd say. To handle others, use your heart. My dad used to own rental property, trailers mostly, that he would let out for extra income. Once there was this man who was having difficulty making his payments. Dad wanted to evict him, but Mom said no. Instead of evicting him, she gave him a job painting our house. When it was done, she wiped away his debt. This was the example she set for me. Give people a chance to be the best they can. Think well of someone and see if they rise to the occasion. I will forever be trying to be the man my mother expects me to be. She remains an uncompromising presence in my world. When she comes to my shows and sits in the audience, I get nervous. Even at 25 years old, I'm still trying to impress her. When Brett went off to the Marines, I was on vacation in London. Mom phoned me and she was crying. I tried to comfort her, but it wasn't working. I realized that it was the first time I'd ever heard my mother cry for herself. She'd cried for me plenty, and for Brett. Whenever we were hurting, she'd cry. She worried about Papa getting sick, and she cried.